Power corrupts, and absolute power does more than that. It devastates the human mind entirely. Throughout history, monarchs wielding unchecked authority over millions have spiraled into madness so profound that their people lived in constant fear of their erratic whims. This exploration delves into the lives of 11 such rulers, whose disturbing behaviors challenge our very notions of sanity. These men were not merely eccentric leaders with unusual tastes. They were individuals whose unchecked power transformed them into barely recognizable shadows of humanity. From emperors convinced they were made of glass to kings who held military trials for rats, these true stories reveal the darkest consequences when no one dares to refuse a ruler's increasingly deranged commands. The documented historical records, diplomatic correspondences, and eyewitness accounts you are about to encounter expose how absolute power isolates these monarchs, enabling their descent into profound psychological collapse. Power corrupts, but absolute power does far more than just corrupt. It annihilates the human mind entirely. History reveals a chilling pattern among monarchs who held unfettered control over millions. They gradually succumbed to madness so intense that their subjects lived in constant fear of their unpredictable whims. These rulers were not merely eccentric leaders with peculiar tastes. Their unchecked authority transformed them into barely recognizable shadows of humanity. From emperors convinced they were made of glass to kings conducting military trials for rats, these accounts uncover the darkest truths about what transpires when no one dares to challenge a ruler's increasingly irrational demands. The stories that follow are not myths or fables, but well-documented historical realities, preserved in court proceedings, diplomatic letters, and the frightened testimonies of those who witnessed these monarchs' mental disintegration. Each example illustrates how the isolation inherent in absolute power, combined with the inability of anyone to correct the king's behavior, cultivates a perfect breeding ground for complete psychological collapse. What makes these cases especially haunting is their consistent progression across different cultures and eras. At first, these monarchs showed only unusual habits or whims, which their courts reluctantly tolerated. But as their dominance grew and opposition faded, these eccentricities morphed into dangerous obsessions that ultimately threatened their realms. Modern psychology now identifies many of these behaviors as symptoms of serious mental illness, conditions that today might be managed with therapy and medication. Yet in their times, such madness was often explained as divine punishment, evil possession, or the natural consequence of royal bloodline. Their people had no choice but to bear the suffering spawned by the fractured minds of their sovereigns. The impact of these rulers' madness stretched well beyond palace walls. Entire kingdoms felt the heavy toll: wasted wealth on bizarre projects, innocent lives lost to fabricated accusations, and diplomatic ties severed by incomprehensible conduct. These stories serve as a stark warning. Unchecked power does not merely corrupt. It has the capacity to obliterate the human psyche itself. James II of England ascended the throne in 1685, bringing with him personal habits so revolting that even his most loyal courtiers found his presence unbearable. Known for commissioning the famous King James Bible and recognized as a learned scholar, James II's relationship with basic hygiene was catastrophically poor, becoming a defining and damaging characteristic of his reign. His aversion to bathing was infamous throughout Europe. Court records describe a man who went months without washing, believing water weakened the body and made it susceptible to illness. This neglect turned his hair into a breeding ground for lice so numerous that courtiers could hear them moving when standing close to him. The infestation was so bad that parasites would fall onto official documents during meetings. The Venetian ambassador described his breath as putrid beyond words, making private audiences almost unbearable for foreign dignitaries. Neglected teeth, blackened and decayed by diet heavy in sugared fruits, added to the oppressive odor, powerful enough to clear a room. Despite the severity of his condition, court physicians, too terrified to suggest proper dental care, instead offered strong wines and perfumed waters, which failed to address the root problem. His clothing, seldom cleaned, accumulated layers of grease, food stains, and bodily fluids, creating a permanent stench around him. The royal garments, meant to express magnificence, instead became repositories of filth. Courtiers learned to position themselves upwind during ceremonies and even adopted mouth-breathing habits when close to the king. Beyond mere personal preference, James's rejection of cleanliness signified a profound disconnection from social norms understood even by the lowest peasants. This refusal was not ignorance. James was highly educated and certainly aware of hygiene practices. Instead, his filthiness appeared an extreme assertion of royal privilege. Foreign visitors often left England with damaging tales about the unwashed king, undermining diplomatic relations and England's reputation in Europe. French courtiers, themselves accustomed to irregular bathing habits, were shocked by James's condition. Spanish ambassadors reported that his appearance and odor made formal negotiations difficult to conduct with dignity. The tragedy of James II lies not only in his personal decay, but also in how his unchecked power imposed his revolting presence on all around him. No one dared to demand basic cleanliness of their king. Thus, the entire court endured the consequences of one man's descent into filthy madness. Carlos VI of France, who reigned from 1380 to 1422, stands as one of history's most tragic examples of royal madness through his enduring belief that his body was made entirely of glass. This extraordinary psychological condition, now recognized as glass delusion syndrome, dominated the latter decades of his life and had profound political consequences for France. Carlos became utterly convinced that even the slightest touch could cause him to shatter irreparably. This paralyzing fear froze him in place for hours at a time, immobilizing his ability to govern and turning court sessions into surreal spectacles. To protect his fragile body, the king ordered his tailors to embed iron rods into his garments, effectively creating a crude suit of armor designed to prevent any accidental fractures. These iron reinforcements made his royal robes heavy and cumbersome, yet Carlos insisted on their necessity, embodying the depth of his psychological collapse. Daily life for Carlos was ruled by the terror of breaking. He could not sit on an ordinary throne, but required padded seats to cushion his supposed glass form. He refused to ride horses, avoid stone floors, and shunned any participation in ceremonies that involved potential physical contact. His sleeping quarters were padded with cushions on all sides, and dedicated servants ensured no hard object came near him. The court was stripped of anything perceived as a threat to his fragile state. Diplomacy suffered immensely under these bizarre conditions. Ambassadors faced the surreal challenge of conducting state affairs without physically handing documents directly to the king, and negotiations were transformed into elaborate pantomimes. News of France's glass king spread throughout Europe, damaging the dignity of the crown and weakening its authority at a critical juncture in history. Perhaps the most tragic aspect of Carlos VI's delusion was its persistence. For more than 30 years, he remained imprisoned by his own fractured mind, effectively disabling royal governance. Amidst ongoing wars, economic turmoil, and social unrest, France lacked the stable leadership it desperately needed. Carlos VI's glass delusion not only debilitated a monarch, but also left the kingdom vulnerable, marking a haunting chapter of how absolute power, when combined with mental illness and unchecked authority, can lead to utter political stagnation and suffering. Pedro III of Russia reigned for a brief but profoundly unsettling 6 months in 1762. Despite his short tenure, his conduct revealed a level of psychological immaturity so extreme it bordered on complete detachment from reality. At just 34 years old, Pedro treated the immense responsibilities of governing the largest empire on earth as though they were child's play, turning serious state affairs into elaborate, absurd games that disturb his court and ultimately precipitated his downfall. Central to Pedro's peculiar obsession was a fixation on toy soldiers and war simulations. His vast collections of miniature armies, including cannons, cavalry, and infantry formations, became the primary focus of his attention, taking precedence over actual military operations and governance. He would spend hours daily arranging and rearranging these tiny battalions, not as mere pastime, but as a substitute for real strategic decision-making. Pedro's surreal influence extended beyond model soldiers. He forced courtiers and military officers alike to partake in mock battles, requiring them to role-play as troops, crawling on their hands and knees in imitation of his toys. These public displays of demeaning theatrics symbolized his profound disconnect from adult responsibilities and shattered royal decorum. Adding a further layer of absurdity, Pedro held formal military tribunals for rats, accusing them of desertion and cowardice. These proceedings followed rigid military protocols, with charges read aloud, witness testimonies, and sentences handed down, including executions by hanging on miniature gallows designed specifically for this purpose. Such acts, combining childish fantasy with distorted authority, rendered his court a theater of madness. Pedro's detachment from reality also marred diplomatic relations. Foreign ambassadors recounted the surreal experience of negotiating serious treaties while the emperor played with his toy armies, moving miniature cavalry units across sandboxes. These antics devastated Russia's credibility on the international stage, leaving foreign powers uncertain whether they were engaging with a responsible sovereign or part of an elaborate jest. His whimsical governance also led to bizarre promotions and demotions within the real military, with officers rewarded or punished based on the outcomes of his toy soldier conflicts rather than actual battlefield performance. This capricious undermining of military discipline further destabilized the empire's command structure. Witnessing his husband's descent into folly, Catherine, later renowned as Catherine the Great, watched helplessly as his childish obsessions imperiled the nation. Eventually, she orchestrated a coup that ended Pedro's brief, chaotic reign, demonstrating the catastrophic consequences of entrusting boundless power to one utterly detached from reality. King Farouk of Egypt, who reigned from 1936 to 1952, turned the venerable dignity of Egyptian monarchy into a spectacle of grotesque excess, marked by compulsive theft, unrestrained sexual desire, and insatiable material greed, shocking even the most seasoned observers of royal indulgence. Inheriting one of the wealthiest kingdoms in the Middle East, Farouk's bizarre and criminal habits gradually eroded the monarchy's foundation, ultimately contributing to its collapse. Renowned within diplomatic circles as perhaps history's most adept royal pickpocket, Farouk developed a compulsive urge to steal. No possession was safe from his grasp. Watches were lifted from the wrists of dinner guests, fountain pens vanished from ambassadors' pockets, and jewelry disappeared from the necks of women attending state events. His most audacious theft involved filching a watch from Winston Churchill during a diplomatic meeting, a brazen act that made international headlines and severely tarnished Egypt's relations with Britain. Farouk's pathological fascination with red automobiles bordered on obsession, amassing a collection exceeding 200 vehicles, from fire engines to Ferraris, all meticulously painted in varying crimson tones. He invested hours daily inspecting his fleet. Mechanic orders to repaint any vehicle that failed to match his precise shade of red were common. Egyptian law was even altered to criminalize ownership of red cars by anyone other than the king, with violations punishable by imprisonment. Perhaps even more disturbing was Farouk's vast accumulation of pornographic material, reputedly the largest private collection worldwide. Maintaining this extensive library required a dedicated staff cataloging explicit content sourced globally. The king would devote entire days immersed in his collection, neglecting vital state affairs to satisfy his obsession, with an entire royal palace wing devoted solely to its storage and upkeep. Farouk's appetite for food reached medically incomprehensible extremes. He indulged in meals spanning dozens of courses, often consuming food nonstop for hours. Palace archives reveal feasts featuring multiple whole chickens, entire sides of beef, and dozens of desserts. His obesity became so severe that special furniture was custom-built to support his weight, and diplomatic protocols adapted to accommodate his physical constraints. Equally excessive were Farouk's sexual appetites. He maintained a harem containing hundreds of women from across the Mediterranean, many forcibly confined against their will. His constant and extreme demands raised serious health concerns among palace physicians, while the women lived in relentless fear of summons to satisfy his unquenchable desires. Psychologically, Farouk's profile depicts a man utterly consumed by immediate gratification, incapable of delaying or moderating impulses regardless of their social or political repercussions. His theft was not born of necessity. He was among the wealthiest individuals globally, but rather an uncontrollable compulsion to seize anything that caught his eye. This same impulse-controlled deficit manifested in every facet of his existence, from gluttonous eating and sexual excess to hoarding trivial objects. Tragically, Farouk's reign saw personal obsessions consume both resources and focus that should have been dedicated to governing Egypt during a pivotal historical era. While his people grappled with poverty and the nation confronted complex political challenges, the king remained preoccupied entirely with satiating his boundless cravings for food, sex, and stolen treasures. King Martin of Aragon's demise stands as one of history's most bizarre and tragic stories, illustrating how even positive emotions, when taken to extremes, can prove fatal under the weight of absolute power. Renowned for his generally cheerful nature and fondness for humor, Martin's death occurred under circumstances so strange they challenge our understanding of how psychological states can impact physical health. The fateful events unfolded during a royal feast celebrating a successful hunting expedition. The king indulged in a lavish meal filled with multiple courses of roasted meats, rich sauces, intricate pastries, and copious amounts of wine. By the end of the evening, Martin was already suffering from severe indigestion and should have retired to rest. However, instead of withdrawing, a courtier chose that moment to share a joke about a deer they had encountered during the hunt, a joke so amusing it would prove fatal. What followed was an uncontrollable bout of laughter. Martin laughed with such intensity that he could not stop. His body convulsed with overwhelming mirth, escalating from joyful amusement to something alarming. His breathing became erratic as his diaphragm spasmed, his face flushed from red to purple, and tears streamed from his eyes as violent convulsions seized him. Courtiers rushed to assist, but medieval medicine offered no remedy for a king literally laughing himself to death. Eyewitnesses described the laughter continuing for an unbearably long time, with Martin utterly unable to regain control over his physical responses. His overburdened stomach, already strained by the heavy meal, endured violent contractions that likely inflicted internal injuries. The combined stress of excessive eating and uncontrollable laughter created a physiological crisis his frail body could not withstand. Modern medical analysis suggests Martin suffered from syncopal collapse triggered by extreme laughter, a condition where bouts of uncontrollable mirth induce cardiovascular failure in an already stressed individual. His death was likely the result of several compounding factors: overeating, alcohol intake, and a physical strain of prolonged laughter. The psychological implications stretch beyond the mechanics of his death. Martin was a man so used to indulgence and removed from ordinary human limitations that he lost control over his reactions to stimuli. His demise by laughter embodies the ultimate consequence of a life lived without boundary or restraint, where even joy becomes weaponized against survival. The courtiers present at the tragic event were deeply traumatized. Many confessed they could never enjoy humor again without recalling the harrowing vision of their sovereign shaking in fatal laughter. The lethal joke was never told again, and some courtiers developed a lifelong fear of laughter itself. King Martin's death serves as a haunting testament to the dangers of unbridled power, indulgence, and a fragile interplay connecting mind and body within the isolated existence of absolute monarchy. Christian VII of Denmark ascended the throne in 1766 at the age of 17, bringing with him a series of mental disturbances so severe that his 43-year reign became a relentless nightmare for his subjects. His behavior surpassed mere eccentricity or royal privilege, representing a profound collapse of social norms that instilled fear throughout his kingdom and disrupted Scandinavian politics. His unpredictable violent outbursts became infamous across Copenhagen and beyond. Christian would assault courtiers, servants, and even visiting dignitaries spontaneously, often wielding whatever object was at hand. These attacks bore no discernible pattern. A friendly exchange could suddenly escalate into a brutal beating if something in the king's fractured mind triggered his rage. No one within the court was safe from his sudden fury, fostering an atmosphere of constant dread. Perhaps the most bewildering aspect of Christian's reign was his obsession with the children's game leapfrog. This fixation consumed hours of his daily life. He compelled ambassadors, government officials, and foreign guests to participate in prolonged leapfrog sessions, regardless of their age, physical condition, or social status. Sessions often lasted for hours, with the king growing violently angry at any refusal to join or any perceived lack of enthusiasm. These forced games degraded the dignity of the court and bewildered observers. Christian's relationship with animals also reached absurd extremes. He promoted his pet dog to the status of a government minister, complete with official title, salary, and a seat at council meetings. The dog attended cabinet sessions where the king claimed to interpret its barks as advice, integrating them into political decisions. Upon the dog's death, Christian ordered a full state funeral with military honors and declared a period of national mourning, further illustrating the king's detachment from reality. His sexual conduct became increasingly erratic and disturbing as his mental health deteriorated. Christian openly exposed himself without warning, engaged in masturbation during official ceremonies, and made inappropriate advances toward anyone who caught his attention, regardless of age, gender, or rank. Courtiers devised elaborate measures to shield visitors from the king's indecent behavior. Yet his unpredictable actions made complete protection impossible. Christian's eating habits reflected his break from normal human behavior as well. He would tear into meat with his hands, throw scraps on the floor, and sometimes consume garbage or inedible items. Periods of refusing to eat, often claiming food was poisoned, were followed by episodes of excessive gluttony until vomiting ensued. Meals turned into degrading public spectacles that horrified foreign visitors and damaged Denmark's international standing. Tragically, Christian's mental state rendered him vulnerable to manipulation by those around him, particularly his personal physician, Johann Friedrich Struensee. Struensee exploited the king's illness to wield real power, effectively ruling Denmark as a puppet master while conducting an affair with the queen. This arrangement incited a constitutional crisis that nearly destroyed the Danish monarchy. The repercussions of Christian VII's madness stretched far beyond palace intrigues. His erratic conduct disrupted diplomatic relations and domestic governance, affecting the daily lives of ordinary Danes who lived under the constant threat of his whims. His reign exemplifies how mental illness, when entangled with absolute power, can become a national catastrophe, subjecting millions to the unpredictable consequences of a fractured mind. Caligula, the mad emperor, Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, better known as Caligula, turned the immense power of the Roman Empire into a terrifying spectacle of madness that redefined a notion of imperial tyranny. His rule from 37 to 41 AD was marked by a profound psychological breakdown that shocked a society already familiar with excess and violence. Caligula's delusions of divinity and his bizarre obsession with his horse became infamous symbols of his deteriorating sanity and the disintegration of Roman governance. Caligula's relationship with his horse, Incitatus, was extraordinary and tragic. He did not merely adore the animal. He genuinely believed Incitatus possessed intelligence surpassing that of his human counselors. The horse lived in extravagance, with a marble stable, an ivory manger, purple blankets, and a collar encrusted with precious gems, enjoying comforts beyond what many Roman citizens had. Caligula's plan to make Incitatus a consul of Rome, complete with voting rights in the Senate and authority over military affairs, stands as one of history's most insane governmental proposals. He would purportedly spend hours conferring with the horse, interpreting its barks and body language as counsel, and incorporating this advice into imperial decisions. It was only Caligula's assassination that prevented the appointment from becoming reality. His grandiose delusions extended well beyond his equine confidant. Caligula proclaimed himself a living deity, assuming the identities of gods like Jupiter, donning thunderbolts and a golden crown, demanding worship as the divine king. At other times, he claimed to embody Apollo, Diana, or even Venus, supporting these disguises with elaborate costumes and theatrics. The emperor forced his subjects into acts of worship, compelling them to prostrate themselves before his statues and offer sacrificial rites under penalty of death. Massive resources were diverted to construct temples dedicated solely to his cult, undermining the empire's priorities and creating religious turmoil. Caligula's public interactions became increasingly erratic and ominous. He would unpredictably interrupt speeches to announce divine revelations or order executions based on messages received from his horse. Those who failed to worship promptly faced death. Official ceremonies deteriorated into harrowing displays of insanity, leaving participants traumatized and damaging the imperial reputation. His bizarre practice of speaking with statues, sometimes violently arguing or destroying them if replies were unsatisfactory, was a chilling illustration of his fractured mind. Ultimately, Caligula's reign demonstrated that absolute power could transform a human being into a figure utterly detached from reality and humanity itself. His madness was not mere eccentricity, but a fundamental break from rational governance. Rome survived only because his own guards recognized that his madness threatened the empire's very survival and assassinated him to end the destructive reign. Ludwig II of Bavaria, reigning from 1864 to 1886, crafted a realm so entwined with fantasy that it drained his kingdom's resources and culminated in his enigmatic death. Dubbed the fairy tale king, Ludwig's fascination with medieval romance and myth transported Bavaria into an elaborate stage for his elaborate delusions, marked by grandiose castles, imaginary dining companions, and a complete abdication of royal duties. His most famous manifestation of madness was the creation of Neuschwanstein Castle, a medieval-style fortress built with advanced 19th-century engineering that had no practical role beyond embodying Ludwig's romantic fantasies. This construction was not just an expensive project, but a tangible symbol of his retreat from reality. Ludwig poured vast fortunes into creating this fairy tale castle, a monument to his obsession with knights, chivalry, and the operas of Richard Wagner brought to life. Ludwig's dinner parties with deceased monarchs stand among the most documented displays of royal delusion. He would order sumptuous meals for guests who existed only in his imagination. Tables were set for long-dead kings and queens. Conversations were held with empty seats, and toasts were raised to invisible interlocutors. Servants were compelled to serve multiple courses to these ghostly guests while the king engaged in lively dialogues with his imaginary companions. As his condition worsened, Ludwig adopted a nocturnal existence, sleeping through the day and conducting his affairs at night, reversing the natural rhythms of court life and governance. His nightly wanderings through his castles resembled elaborate theatrical productions where he donned costumes representing historical heroes and enacted scenes from his beloved operas and legends. His fascination with Wagner's music blurred the lines between performance and reality. Ludwig earnestly believed he inhabited Wagner's mythic world and spent nights performing operatic scenes solo, singing to an imagined audience amid intricate staging conceived solely in his mind. Completely rejecting contemporary life, Ludwig refused to accept the Industrial Revolution, political upheavals reshaping Europe, or even the fundamental responsibilities of kingship. He inhabited a self-made medieval realm where knights saved princesses, magic was real, and monarchy was exercised by divine right rather than political necessity, a fantasy that shielded him from the complexities of 19th century European affairs. Ludwig's extravagant escapism nearly bankrupted Bavaria. His obsessive castle building, theatrical enactments, and constant remodeling devoured funds that might otherwise have supported infrastructure, education, or military readiness. His advisors watched helplessly as the kingdom's treasury was drained to feed one man's elaborate fantasies. The mystery surrounding Ludwig's death, found drowned in Lake Starnberg alongside his psychiatrist, remains unsolved, with theories ranging from suicide to murder or accident. His demise ended a reign that had turned a significant European kingdom into a theatrical set for operatic fantasy. Ludwig II's legacy stands as a vivid example of how a human mind, when granted boundless resources and unrestrained by external checks, can utterly withdraw from reality, weaving intricate illusions that consume not only the individual, but an entire realm. Ibrahim the Mad, the Ottoman Sultan reigning from 1640 to 1648, epitomizes a reign marked by terrifying sexual obsession and brutal violence. His rule spiraled into a reign of terror, merging pathological compulsions with genocidal fury, leaving a traumatized empire behind and ultimately leading to his assassination by his own government. Raised in isolation within the palace's gilded cage, a practice intended to thwart potential threats to the throne, Ibrahim spent his formative years cut off from normal human interaction. This prolonged confinement bred a volatile psychological state, laden with repressed desires and warped sexuality that erupted catastrophically upon his accession. Ibrahim's fixation with obese women became infamous across the empire. Agents scoured his vast territories in search of the heaviest females, rewarding those who could locate women matching his rare and disturbing preferences. He kept meticulous records of their weights and measurements, treating them less as individuals and more as objects to fulfill his insatiable sexual demands. His harem, unlike the structured Ottoman courts of tradition, transformed into a nightmare of fear, with hundreds of women imprisoned solely to serve the Sultan's relentless urges. The violence he wrought upon these women was so extreme that many perished under his assaults, necessitating a continual replenishment of victims. The darkest atrocity of Ibrahim's reign was a horrific act driven by jealousy and paranoia. Believing his concubines had been unfaithful, he ordered the drowning of 280 women from his harem, sewing them into weighted sacks before casting them into the Bosporus. This heinous act stands as one of the most brutal episodes of gender-based violence ever recorded. The terror it generated was later chronicled through the testimony of a survivor who managed to escape by breaking free underwater, offering a haunting account that confirms the scale and systematic nature of the massacre. Ibrahim's depravity extended beyond his palace walls, as he routinely abducted women throughout Constantinople, spreading fear among the populace. Families lived in terror of having their daughters, wives, or sisters forcibly taken to satisfy the Sultan's whims. His mental decline manifested in obsessive need for sensory indulgence, filling his palace walls with costly furs that he claimed were essential for his delicate skin. This fixation drained the imperial treasury, further demonstrating his detachment from reality as his behaviors grew increasingly extravagant and detached from the welfare of his empire. In the end, the horror of Ibrahim's reign was too great for even his closest advisors to tolerate. Recognizing the existential threat his madness posed to the Ottoman Empire, his own government orchestrated his assassination. This rare act, removing a sovereign ruler to save a nation, marked the tragic culmination of a dictatorship consumed by a sexual obsession and unrestrained violence. Ibrahim the Mad remains a stark embodiment of how absolute power, entwined with psychological instability, can unleash catastrophic destruction both on a ruler's own mind and the empire he governs. Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor to unite China, became obsessed with the pursuit of immortality, a quest that ultimately led to his demise and highlighted the devastating effects of absolute power on human judgment. Reigning from 259 to 210 BC, his fear of death grew into an all-consuming fixation, influencing every aspect of his rule. Determined to defy mortality, Qin Shi Huang employed legions of alchemists, physicians, and mystics charged with uncovering the secret to eternal life. Eager to please their emperor, these so-called experts concocted increasingly perilous elixirs, with mercury at the core of their formulas. Believing these mercury pills would purify his body and grant him immortality, the emperor consumed them daily with religious fervor, unaware that the poison was sapping his health and sanity. The irony of ingesting a deadly substance to avoid death remained lost on a ruler whose mind had been warped by unchecked authority. His daily routine centered around these toxic treatments, augmented by strange diets, herbal remedies, and elaborate purification ceremonies. These rituals became solemn events attended by court officials, compelled to watch their sovereign slowly unravel. Embodying his fixation on eternity, Qin Shi Huang commissioned grand projects like the famed Terracotta Army, constructed not only as a testament to his power, but as protection he believed he would need in the afterlife. This massive endeavor drained the empire's resources and cost thousands of lives, sacrificed to support one man's deluded vision. Paranoia overwhelmed the emperor, driving him to sleep in different palaces nightly, travel in identical carriages to confuse would-be assassins, and execute anyone who divulged his whereabouts. This lifestyle, compounded by his mercury consumption, led to physical trembling, slurred speech, and deteriorating mental faculties, a visible descent into madness caused by the very quest for eternal life. When Qin Shi Huang died from mercury poisoning on a journey through the eastern provinces, his advisors concealed his death from the public, transporting his body in a sealed carriage reeking of rotting fish to mask decomposition. His final journey epitomized a ruler whose obsession with immortality rendered him both physically and metaphysically toxic. The tragic tale of Qin Shi Huang starkly illustrates how absolute power, intertwined with fear and paranoia, can corrupt human reason, turning the quest for everlasting life into a pathway for self-destruction that ultimately devastates both the individual and the realm he governed. King Adolf Fredrik of Sweden met a most unusual end in 1771. dying not through battle, rebellion, or assassination, but from an extreme episode of overeating that literally caused his digestive system to fail. His final meal stands as a chilling symbol of royal excess pushed to deadly limits. The unfortunate series of events began during a royal feast celebrating Shrove Tuesday, a customary pre-Lenten indulgence in Swedish tradition. Yet Adolf Fredrik approached this occasion with an insatiable appetite that defied all reason, consuming amounts of food that would overwhelm multiple ordinary individuals combined. Historical records detail his last meal with grim precision. He feasted on lobster, caviar, sauerkraut, kippers, and champagne in vast quantities before proceeding to a dessert that would prove fatal. The king consumed 14 servings of semlor, traditional Swedish pastries filled with rich cream and almond paste, even though he was already uncomfortably full from the copious preceding courses. These semlor were not simple treats. Each serving consisted of dense cream, thick almond paste, and soft bread designed to absorb liquids and expand within stomach. 14 such heavy portions created a volume impossible for his digestive system to handle, resulting in what modern medical experts identify as an acute gastric rupture. Though his death was not instantaneous, the king endured excruciating hours of agony as his overstretched stomach strained to contain the monstrous meal. Court physicians, initially mistaking his discomfort for severe indigestion, quickly recognized an emergency beyond their ability to remedy. In an era lacking adequate medical interventions, there was no hope for a king whose stomach had literally burst from gluttony. Witnesses to Adolf Fredrik's final hours recall the horror of seeing their monarch suffer overwhelming pain, unable to find relief in any position. The regal dignity of kingship was utterly shattered as he writhed in torment, undone by his own voracious excess. Beyond the immediate cause, the death reveals a profound psychological disconnect. Adolf Fredrik seemed incapable of recognizing or respecting basic survival instincts that would inhibit such self-destructive consumption. This was no mere enjoyment of a lavish meal, but a catastrophic failure of self-control and bodily awareness. News of the king's bizarre demise shocked contemporary Europe and resonated with a grim mix of disbelief and dark humor. His death became a cautionary tale whispered in royal courts, emblematic of the absurd and dangerous heights that unchecked privilege and self-indulgence could reach. Ultimately, Adolf Fredrik's fatal feast underscores how absolute power and privilege can erode fundamental human restraint, sometimes with tragic and unforgettable consequences. Henry VIII of England's later years mark one of the most horrific transformations in royal history, as this once charismatic king deteriorated into a grotesque figure whose physical collapse mirrored his mental unraveling. By the time his reign ended in 1547, Henry had become a near corpse, his body literally falling apart while his mind was consumed by paranoia, rage, and unchecked sexual obsession. His obesity reached staggering proportions, exceeding 400 pounds, necessitating specially reinforced furniture, strengthened floors, and mechanical devices just to move or support him. Walking unaided was impossible. Servants had to carry him in custom chairs or employ pulley systems to haul him upstairs. Even the palace itself had to be structurally adapted to bear his massive weight. A festering, ulcerated leg, likely the result of a jousting injury years prior, became a source of constant infection and agony. The wound never healed properly and emitted a foul odor that poisoned the air in Henry's presence. Physicians, fearing to offend the king, refrained from proper treatment, offering instead ineffective remedies and prayers as the rock consumed his flesh. The ceaseless physical pain and looming mortality triggered a dramatic psychological decline. Henry's notorious temper, once intimidating, descended into frightening cruelty. He issued executions on impulse, condemned innocent people on fabricated charges, and erupted in a violent outburst that left witnesses shattered and fearful for their own lives. Personal hygiene declined into squalor. His clothing, stained with food, wine, and bodily fluids, was changed infrequently due to the difficulty of dressing his bloated and diseased frame. The combination of his infected leg, poor cleanliness, and digestive troubles created a stench so overpowering that courtiers often fled his presence to vomit. Even as his body failed, Henry's desperation for sexual encounters intensified, fueled by a dread of death. His attempts at seduction became grotesque pastiches of romance, repelling potential partners horrified by his deteriorated state. Meanwhile, his appetite remained insatiable. He consumed vast amounts of food while likely suffering from diabetes, perpetuating a vicious cycle of gluttony and bodily decline. His meals became public spectacles, marked by grotesque indulgence that disgusted foreign dignitaries and underscored his complete loss of regal dignity. Perhaps the most unsettling testament to Henry's decayed state emerged posthumously. His coffin burst open during transit to his burial site, his rapidly decomposing body releasing gases that exploded the coffin lid. Liquefied remains spilled onto the church floor, where dogs were later seen licking up the viscous fluids. This final indignity completed the harrowing transformation of a once mighty king into something barely human. Henry VIII's tragic decline embodies the destructive effects unrestrained power can have on a human body and mind. His decay and paranoia stand as a chilling reminder that absolute authority, when combined with personal torment and isolation, can reduce even the most formidable leaders to monstrous shadows of their former selves. The 11 monarchs we've explored embody a chilling truth about the human psyche under the weight of absolute power. Such unchecked authority does not merely corrupt, it utterly destroys. Each ruler began as a human with recognizable strengths and flaws, yet isolation and unchallengeable dominance eroded their sanity, morality, and humanity. From James II's neglect of hygiene to Carlos VI's glass delusion, Pedro III's toy soldier obsession to Ibrahim the Mad's violent sexual rampage, these patterns of psychological disintegration repeat across time, culture, and empire. Their madness extended far beyond personal tragedy, inflicting suffering on entire nations, exhausting resources, and destabilizing societies. History reveals that concentrating limitless power in a single individual does not just risk creating tyrants. It guarantees the eventual ruin of both these rulers and all those they govern. The legacy of these tragic figures warns us that absolute authority is fundamentally incompatible with human sanity, leading not only to the downfall of the monarchs themselves, but to the collapse of the civilizations they once ruled. If these chilling tales of monarchs undone by absolute power captivated you, please consider subscribing, liking, commenting, or sharing this exploration. Help spread awareness about how unchecked authority shapes history and human destiny.